Hi, and thank you for coming to the MPR, or Mandatory Play Counting meeting for the Mid-America region. I'm Jane Brooks. I run MPRs and I'm the go-to person for it for Mid-America. Next to me is Jamie Fletcher. Jamie works beside me. We run the regional playoffs. We do all the play counting ourselves for that, and we also fill in at nationals as needed for play counting. So we welcome both people in the room today and also anyone joining us virtually to this meeting. So a couple things to talk about before we actually get into the play counting itself. This year in Mid-America, we have no more weighted divisions. So there's not a weigh-in prior to games anymore. However, there is still a check-in. There is still an ID check, and we call them roster specialists now. I believe Jamie's saying Chicagoland still has Tiny Mite. Those would have to go with a weigh-in. Either way, they should be coming somewhere, wherever you would have done weigh-ins in the past. You should have a roster, not you, but the roster specialist. And we're really encouraging them to have the play counting sheets at that time as well. This helps you as a play counter because if little Johnny is absent, they can mark him off right then. There's nothing worse than sitting there thinking that, trying to find a kid who has no plays or telling them they have no plays and he's like, oh, he's not even here, okay? It can save you a lot of miscounting later if you know that ahead of time. If there's a child out from the beginning, there are codes at the very bottom of the form. Most associations, the business agent is the one who prints these out prior to the game times and makes sure that you have them, whether your game is home or away. Right? If a child is not on the printed sheet and they are there to play, you may not write a child in and have them play. This is this comes from the certified roster. It is generated out of roster software by the roster that was approved by your league or conference. So if somebody says, oh, this is little Johnny, he wasn't on this when we printed him, if you can't verify that it's on the roster by seeing that, maybe this was dated, because they do print at the very, very bottom with the date printed, that there has been a more recent roster with that child, they cannot be written in.
How would they do that?
I'm sorry?
How would they do that?
If they printed these prior to adding someone at emergency weigh-ins or certification, that's how. So these would have been predating that. It happens. I've had it happen to, actually to me, with a cheer team. Somebody argued with me that the team wasn't who it was, and I said, if you look at the date, you printed the roster to certify it prior to when we actually were competing, like after we added with the emergency thing. So that's the only way. So anyone who tells you after that, that they don't, but it very rarely comes up, but as a unwritten rule in Mid-America, or in Northern Indiana, we generally, if a child is not there at the time of kickoff, they do not play. Because we've already gone through certifying the team and who's there. So I've only ever seen, and that again is a Northern Indiana sort of standing courtesy. It's not a written rule, but that is generally how we have done that for several years. Right. One of the questions we get all the time about these is that the little guys who are now 6 and 7U, or Tiny Mite, if you still have those in Chicagoland, is that, oh, they're not listed here, so we can just agree to whatever plays. No. Tiny Mites, by national rules, get 15 plays. Before anybody grumbles or starts sending us messages or comments, it is what it is. It's 15 plays. It's a national rule. We can't change that, we can't lessen that. At the regional level, Northern Indiana and Chicagoland can't lessen that. Coaches on the field cannot lessen that. That is the mandatory plays that they need to get in. It has been that way for years. It was that way when we used to carry, 16 to 30. Mites and stretching out that amount of time that they're there, placing them or coaching them and getting them where they're supposed to be. They're limiting that so that that's not a way to eat up that clock with the littles because that was becoming a problem at times. And that's a coaching issue. Your coaches should not be coaching in that sense at the games. They should be, they should be coaching at practice. So Tiny Mites is 15 all the time, okay? For the other divisions, no deals are made on the field either, all right? When you look at this sheet, 8U, 9U, or what was formerly known as Mighty Mite, is the line that's right above where it says the team name. So if a Mighty Mite team has 16 kids there to play, all those kids need 12 plays. It's not, hey, we've just been doing 10, or do you just want to do 10? It is 12 plays. The size of the team is not determined in terms of plays by how many are listed on the sheet. It is determined by how many kids are there and certified to play that day. So a team may have this whole sheet filled out with 35 players, but if only 16 show up and they're a 8U, 9U team, they're getting 12 plays, not, 8, okay? So it's based on how many kids are there and certified and eligible to play. For the top line, that line is only for your 10U and above. And again, it's the same thing. It's the number of kids eligible to play. So in order to only get 6 plays, or the smallest number of mandatory plays, you would have to have between 31 and 35 kids eligible, certified to play that day. Now, let's say they start with 31 kids and they have one get hurt. Once the game starts, it doesn't matter. They still stay at 6 plays even though a child gets hurt and can no longer play. That doesn't change the number of mandatory plays for them because it is set by how many kids are certified at that initial face-off and to start the game. Another thing that we have run into the last couple years also is that every team needs to provide 2 play counters. Okay? There should be, at any game, 4 play counters total on the field. 2 from each team. So you provide on your own sideline someone to help the opposing team's play counter. They're the ones who are going to get your play counting sheet. They're the ones that are going to be holding it on their clipboard, and they're the ones that are going to be making the marks. If you stand there and you make marks next to them the whole time, but you're not communicating, and theirs is messed up, that's on you, because theirs is the one that counts. Your job when you are spotting on your own sideline is to assist that play counter to make sure that they are getting the correct kids who are going into the game and playing and marking those plays accordingly. When you go to the other side, you will get their sheet and they will give you a spotter to do the same thing. If you get to a sideline of an opposing team and they do not have a play counter helping you, you can ask whoever the home site has a supervisor. You can send somebody to go get them. They have to provide you with someone to help you. Otherwise, you do the best you can, and if at the end of the game you show that there are kids that don't have their plays because they didn't have anybody help you, then if they're winning, they just forfeited. They have to pull a coach over to help. They have to pull a coach over to help. Right? But they have to provide someone just like your side has to provide someone to help spot. Teams that proceed on to regionals don't have to worry about that because we do that. We provide, Jamie and I work as a team. She spots, I take the plays, and then we have 2 other people that work as a team assigned to the other sideline because we don't have any skin in the game. We don't care who wins or loses. So it provides an unbiased people, and there's a little more at stake when we get into regional playoffs and postseason. In terms of actually preparing your sheet, the one thing that I always say, and I've been doing this meeting for too many years now, is that you have to develop a system. Now I will tell you, if we explained our system to you, you would be like, that's a crazy amount of stuff you're doing. But we have developed that over the years because we do the more high stakes games. So if you come to us at a game and you want to be like, well, little Malachi, he was in the whole game, we'll be able to show you play by play where he was because we change symbols and we both keep track and we can show you every series of the game who was in, all right? That's because we have had people come up and argue with us in the past. That is a system that we have developed because those are games where a trip to nationals is on the line. But you do have to have some sort of system. Most of the people I know that have done this for years, and some of the smartest people that I know will tell you that when we get a sheet that just has neat little check marks all the way across, we're like, no way you are really counting plays. Because it's a mess, especially if you're doing the big boys, where Pee-wee, not Pee-wee, but whatever it is now, 12U and 13U and 72U, that there's no kickoff now. That stuff goes fast. There's no catch-up time. So you have to be able to keep track so that you are actually knowing who's going in. This sheet gives you a space to mark older lighters. Older lighters are not really relevant to us as play counters. It's really an unnecessary box. I don't ever use it for anything. Sometimes I'll mark the offense, starting offense and starting defense, but I'll tell you more and more these last few years, we don't do that because there have been so many times somebody says, oh, we're putting in our maroon starting defense. And then at the last minute, they pull a little hunter aside, like, hey, come here, I want to tell you something. Juan, go in. And they'll argue with us that, no, their starting maroon, defense should all be done. Well, most of them are, but not the one that you pulled out. Because coaches, when they're in the middle of the game, they don't remember sometimes that they pulled a kid out for, this little talk for a minute. And if 5 plays happen, boom, 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 that kid's not going to match anymore. That's just how it is. For your own sanity, I would suggest that you mark out after you know how many are there for the day, mark out the first column where it has numbers, because you will be amazed at how many times your eyes catch the first number instead of the jersey number, and you realize you're marking the wrong kid. You're marking row 12 instead of number 12. Hopefully your business managers are printing these out and they print them in jersey order, not last name. We try to stress that because if you get a mandatory play sheet that is in last name order, is gonna be a hot mess to check because you're gonna be looking for numbers all over, up and down. Everyone should do them by jersey number. We continue to stress that because we get new business managers in frequently. But I really, especially if you're, if you have older eyes like Jamie has, if you get rid of that first column, it can really help and save you some, heartache later. I will also, for myself, mark out a line where it shows they've got all their plays in, okay? That way, I'm not having to keep counting every time. I know when that kid reaches that line, they're finished. I usually suggest that you have a scrap piece of paper of some size, and I usually keep them like half size like that so I can clip it on my board so that as the spotter's calling off numbers, I can jot the numbers instead of trying to find them on the sheet, and just write the numbers and then keep track of the plays until I can get the actual sheet caught up.
We had a question on the YouTube live chat.
Okay.
I believe it was, they must provide the sheet for every game.
Business managers should provide the sheet for their teams. So home team business managers should have all the ones for their home teams playing at that site that day. Those business managers, let's use an example of Knox. Jamie can go in and print all the all the MPR sheets for her teams that are playing at her home site that day, but she does not have access to South Lake's rosters to print all of South Lake's rosters. So the traveling team has to make sure that they get their MPR sheets before they leave to travel from their business manager. And if you don't have jerseys that have the same number, if you're not using like reversible jerseys, if the home and away numbers are different, remind your business managers to print both depending on the jersey. I know we don't seem to run into this as much as we used to because a lot of people have switched to the reversible jerseys. But in the past, that has been an issue that they come with the wrong one and then you're, marking out a jersey number and writing one in, and again, you can lose track of them.
And I've also found that it's a good idea to also just, once your business manager gives you that NPR sheet, make a couple copies and throw them in your team book, because that team book should always be with you, therefore that NPR sheet is going to be with you as well. Especially
after emergency certifications on the 30th, I would, once you get a clean roster and a clean certified roster, have them print out some MPR sheets, home and away, and just put them in your book so you have them just in case. Scrap paper though it can save you, especially if the bane of your existence as a play counter are not going to be argumentative coaches. It's going to be coaches who have a substitution strategy of 2 kids in for a play, 2 kids out for a play, 2 kids in for a play, 2 kids out for a play. Because they're going to think that they've given them equal numbers of plays, and they're going to forget that certain penalties, most penalties, don't count as plays. So if 1 and 2 go in on a play, and it's a good play, and they come out, but then 3 and 4 go in, and there's a penalty, but they still come out, they have no play. So the other 2 are always going to be ahead, and if that keeps happening, and sometimes, weirdly enough, it just does, they think that they both should have 6 and 6, and their first 2 have 6, the other ones have 2. It just happens that way sometimes. So having some extra scrap paper can also help you kind of keep track of those kind of in and out substitutions. I will tell you that for me, and again, this is why I say you have to work out the strategy that works best for you. For me, I have almost always done, I do eyes on the field and who's on the field. I only go behind the players on the sideline if we're looking for a kid. There are people who do all of their play counting, no matter the size of the team, where they only count who's on the sideline. It works for them. I cannot explain to you how it works for them, because my brain does not work like that, okay? I do eyes on the field, who's there, and I use the system of different symbols. So if we start the first series, everybody who's out to play on that series, if they're on offense, they get a check mark. And if they have 3 downs in a row and there's no substitutions, there's 3 check marks for all those kids, okay? If somebody comes out, I changed my symbol to a square, whatever. Now, everybody who is in, minus the kid who came out, and then the new addition gets a square. That way, I just can keep track of that I have 11 people on there, okay? So, it helps sometimes. I found when I first started this, like 15 years ago, just trying to do check marks, I was losing track, and if a play didn't count, or somebody came off, it could get really confusing. I know people who successfully play count, they use numbers. So everybody who's out on play 1 gets a 1. Everybody who's out on play 2 gets a 2, a number 2 in the box, instead of just doing check marks. So, you know, Jamie kind of drew an example here. I'll show you. I know it won't be as easy to see. So if I started with checks for 2 plays, everybody would have a check, everybody would have a check. Well, then this kid comes out the next time, so I don't have anything for him here, but everybody else has X's, X's, and here's the new kid at the bottom. That way I can just keep track of who's there and that I have 11 kids out. Because sometimes, we've had plenty of times where they play and they keep playing with 10. And again, if they told you their gold offense was out there and the whole offense was out there and they didn't catch, they only had 10, they're going to try to argue they had all those kids out there. This really helps to show, you know, so, you know, however you do the system, whatever works for you, you know, people always want me to tell them, well, how exactly should I do it? Well, I don't know, like, Jamie is fabulous and has worked with me for probably 4 or 5 years now, is a fabulous spotter. But if we switch spots and I asked her to do this,
I can't do this.
It just, but keeping track of the numbers, keeping track of the plays while I'm finding stuff, like she can do that and keep track of those, and the substitutions while I'm still trying to get, you know, things caught up. Because as I said, especially with the bigger boys, those plays move fast and it is very easy to get behind. You are probably going to make mistakes at first. If you think, you know, you may have made one or missed one, and as I said, especially with some of those substitution schedules, it gets tough. You know, err on the side of, you know, grace, in the sense of if you think you might have missed one, and it's a kid that you have seen out there a lot, you know, then you may want to do that, or say, you know what, just keep a thing there, like I sometimes will put like a -1 because they were out on a play and then I'd already marked them, but they got pulled. So then I just know, oh, I got one that I owe, right, still. When he comes back out, I get rid of that -1, I just scratch it out, now I know he's back to even. Figuring out a system for you is the best way. Eyes on the field is the best way. We also tend to do, once you have the majority of the team, because your kids that go both ways, they're going to be done right away, right? If a coach comes to you at at halftime or, you know, the start of the 4th and says, oh, no way, Johnny's not done, you know, he's my starter, he's one of my starters, then you can say, well, if he's a starter, should be no problem putting him in the 4th because he's one of your starters, he should get his plays, right? I will tell you in my experience, and I have had film to prove it many a time, that if they come to you and they say, oh, he's a starter, he should have all his plays, it is very unlikely that kid is a starter, or for whatever reason, they pulled him that day. So or he was out, maybe he had an equipment malfunction, maybe he was injured. Coaches get hyper-focused. Most of them, they're not trying to like mess with you, they just do forget. I mean, I play counted for my own husband for a while. When he coached, we are still married, but there were times where he wanted to argue with me and I was like, dude, you took him out to talk to him, you know, 2 more plays happen. I mean, they just forget because they're hyper-focused on just, you know, their part in it. And here's the best way that you can also keep things cordial between you and the other team, is with that scrap paper that you have at halftime, before they go into their locker room or their break on the field, give them a hit list. So I do jersey number, I make like a little, you know, 2-square column thing. Jersey number, plays needed. Number 12 needs 3. Number 5 needs 10, right? You give them that, and that way they go in, it looks just something like this. It's not crazy elaborate. It's, you know, a mini little old-fashioned hand-drawn spreadsheet, and that way they know exactly what they need to do at halftime, right? If they don't take advantage of that, and this kid down here, number 5, who still needs 10 plays, isn't going in at all during the 3rd quarter, you've done what you can to communicate that, right? I also tell them from the beginning, one coach. One coach is the MPR coach who comes and asks. Because otherwise, you have a team of 10 on a coaching staff, and I will tell you, there are times you will have every single one of those 10 coaches come to you multiple times going, how many does number 8 need? How many does number 8 need? You'll never get any plays counted. One coach. One coach comes and asks, that's the person who's in charge. Say it nicely. Hey, can you please designate, you know, one coach to come is the one who checks on your MPRs so that I can stay as focused as possible on the field, because it will drive you crazy, and that, more than anything, I think, is what starts to sometimes, it's distracting, and it causes frustration, and frustration leads to heightened tension, and that's when you get people snapping off on each other, okay? When you get to the 4th quarter, you have, if I have these kids and they all still need these plays, I just tell the sideline judge, hey, I need a second, I got kids to get in. Even if they started the clock, they'll stop and they'll wind it back. They should. The head referees have talked to them about this. They will take a, you know, officials timeout so that you can get those kids in. Now, what happens with a lot of MPR kids, unfortunately, is they go out, they're not used to being out there much, so they get a play in, they start to run right off the field. So you're gonna have to be there and say, 73, 73, you stay in, right? And then just communicate as they come off, hey coach, 56 has all his plays. A couple more plays happen, hey coach, you know, 82 has all his plays. The more you can communicate and keep that communication sort of open and professional, it will be helpful to you getting this done, and it will be less frustrating, because it is not an easy job at all. This is the other part of play counting that people don't like, especially if you go to the other sideline, is if you are on the opposing sideline counting plays, you cannot yell and cheer for your team. It's kind of like the sideline crew that holds the stick, yeah, flags and chains. They are part of the referees. They're neutral. They're supposed to be neutral. So you can't be yelling and cheering and hooping. I know, I understand. I will tell you, my son just went to college this week, and I watched many of his games on video, even though I was at all of them, because I was, you know, play counting a lot of them, and it can be hard to watch. Sometimes you can work out a deal with somebody who's like the game ahead of you, if you have that. I mean, we suggest this. A lot of people don't ever take advantage of it. Say, hey, I'll come play count your game if you'll stay play count mine, so so that you can, actually watch your own child's game. A lot of people don't want to do that because they don't want to have to come for the extra, hour and a half or whatever. But it can help with that. So a lot of people don't like that. That's one of the things. You cannot have your phone out for any reason on the sideline. That's true whether you're coached, chain gang, MPR.
Your photographer does not have a cell phone. If they're the photographer, they
have to have a camera.
there's a camera.
Yeah. For Tiny Mites with the 15 plays, they are the only division that if they have to get put into the game, they have to stay in till the end. This is a Mid-America rule. It has come out from our regional director, Jack Arnett. It's in memo form. It will probably be circulating again in the next couple days to remind people. I know sometimes it's hot. And they say, oh, it's too hot for them to play the whole game. Tell the coaches, get these kids, come up with a strategy to get these kids in. So Tiny Mites, if they do not have their 15 plays, when they go in, are they still on, did they go to, no, they're on 2 halves still. So when they go in, for them, when it gets to 10 minutes left in the second half, if they do not have all their plays, they go in and play the remaining 10 minutes, all right? The reasoning behind this is Tiny Mites is solely really a learning level, right? It's developing them. They need to be out there playing and making mistakes and learning, and if they don't get that time on the field during game time, they're not going to know anything. And I will tell you, having done this for forever, there is nothing sadder to someone who's devoted so much time and service to Pop Warner than to see a kid in November be told to go out to a position and they don't even know where that position is. And they're a competitive team. So we're talking 11U, 12U. That should never happen. That means those kids are not only not getting game time, they're not getting practice time. Okay?
Got another question.
Oh, go ahead.
How can we take advantage of utilizing the other play counters from the previous game? How do we know who the other play counters are?
Talk with your coaches, have your coaches talk, or talk to your association president. They should be able to help you work something out. I mean, we used to do the same thing with concessions. We would try to volunteer to run the concession the game before, the game after, the game where our kids play, right? So that you can still watch that. I mean, so ideally, we're always hopeful that when you guys get involved as Tiny Mites, you're becoming a football family with your association, and that the goal is to help that association be as successful as possible, all right? And by helping each other do those sorts of things, that's what creates these tight-knit communities. And so, trying to make those deals really helps you, and then you get to see, your kids do what they're doing. Just to clarify too, Mighty Mites and up, they're the normal, they go in at the 4th. Once their plays are done, they can come out. It's only Tiny Mites that cannot. 6 and 7U, yes, I know.
Using the old terminology.
Hey, I finally stopped saying junior midget, so give me a break. When you are done, you sign whichever side you're on, visiting or home. If you can write the score and you know it at the end, a lot of times play counters are done play counting before the final score, so the home association can take care of that. Now, I will tell you that when I used to play count just at the association level, I used to always, when I was finished, take a picture of the sheet I had. So that if anybody said, oh, you didn't turn it in, or where is it, or whatever, I could just send them a picture. That's probably just because I come from a school and direct services background, and you were always document. It can save a lot of heartache, but otherwise, these get turned in to whoever is the site supervisor at your site. If it's your home site, give it to somebody on the board. If you're at the visiting site, there should be board members there, right? If I was from Michigan City and I'm at Knox, when I finish, I'm gonna go give this to somebody who is near the certification room or ask where the nearest board member or the president is and give it to them, and they keep them in a binder.
What if a 6U kid refuses to go in and play? Can they be absent from a game, or do they need 15 plays if they are at the field so the team does not have to forfeit?
So my guess is, or I shouldn't say that, how we've always answered this is if you have a kid who's refusing to play at that level, they've also probably been refusing to practice. If they've been refusing to practice, it states in the national rule book that the coach needs to have a discussion with the parent, and then that kid should be dropped. We can't force a kid to play. However, that should be something that's handled prior to game day, because unfortunately, too many coaches will say that about kids that they don't want to have playing, okay? What I'll tell you is if one time, Dylan says, they're like, he won't play, and you can see the kids sitting there screaming on the sideline, blah, 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 mark it, let the home site know, hey, this kid refused, right, to play. However, as a league, if we come in and see that every week little Dylan is starting with 2 plays or something and then getting marked as refused to play, then that's going to be a problem. And honestly, I have only in all these years ever had one time where we've had tiny mites really truly just refuse flat out the whole time to play, and it was regionals, and it was an absolutely frigid day. We were still playing, we were in Michigan City that year was hosting, and if you play the Michigan City Stadium, you get that lake. There's a wind coming off that lake, it's hitting you because the stands are to the south, not to the north, so there's no barrier. And legit, the one team we were play counting for, I think all those kids were just like they were like on strike. But in actuality, every day, if there's just one game or if they're, really hot, I mean, it does happen. I'd say it's very infrequent that a kid really, truly is just refusing to play. And if they are, again, that's a coach should be having that discussion with the parents.
And any child that doesn't get their mandatory plays, the league should be notified
Yes.
to do an investigation.
Right, and they would forfeit the game. So if you get into a situation though where you're like, hey, I don't know, there are site supervisors there, and you can ask the reffing crew. The reffing crew has one of our numbers somewhere. If nothing else, they have Larry Babcock's number, and we can get called to help with that. As I said, it's not very often that it really comes up where a kid truly is just, sometimes they need a little coaxing. 5 and 6-year-olds the first few games can be tough because now you're telling them to do all the things for the last 5 years you told them they can't do, right? We tell them, don't hit, don't touch, keep your hands to yourself. Now we say, hey, go out here and push everybody down. If there's kids that don't get plays, we should know. It should be brought to the league's attention or the conference's attention prior to a league official. At least in Northern Indiana, league officials go and do site checks, and we check these. So if we see that there are times when these same teams are not getting their plays in, then we're going to have a discussion with that coach and that town president. Okay. That's it. So, any questions? Mhm.
You said something earlier about most penalties don't count as a play. What all of those penalties?
So, okay, good question. So, the best way to do it, or to think about it is, if the down marker moves, then it counts. If they replay the down, it doesn't count. Now, kickoffs, although we've eliminated them except the very oldest levels, kickoffs do not count. Point after attempts do not count. And there are still coaches out there who will be like, oh, blah, blah, goes out every time we have a point after kickoff. Yep, still don't count. If the quarterback takes a knee, if they spike the ball, those don't count either. If they intentionally fall to the ground, like if the referee calls it that way, those don't count. Now, I know what y'all are gonna say, which is sometimes there's more play action when a play has actually happened and a penalty occurs. I understand that, but this is not our rule. Again, it is one that we have to uphold. It's how Nationals has defined what counts and what doesn't. So the easiest way is to know kickoffs don't count, point after attempts don't count, spiking, falling down on the ball, taking a knee, those are not considered active plays. A punt does count as an active play. That's why I try not to say special teams sometimes, because it's kickoff that doesn't count, and point after kicks, and point after run-ins or passes, but punts do count as an active play, because they're deciding not to, consider a running or passing play for fourth down. They're deciding to kick the ball, and hoping that they achieve a better field position.
So for the 6-7 if they the first player, they go like to hang off the ball, whatever, drop the ball is dead, then that's not a play.
No, that would be a play because they're not intentionally doing it. I'm talking about,
So if they hike the ball and the ball drops, is that a play?
Right.
That is a play.
Yes, that's a play. If the referee calls some kind of penalty on that, and they replay the downs, then it doesn't count. But if they fumble it, that's a regular play. Again, and that's why people sometimes are like, how come that doesn't count as a play, but they run all the way down the field for 20 yards and, and then there's a flag way down there. That's just how it is. We just enforce it, but that would count. We're talking about them like intentionally, spiking it or having the quarterback just fall down versus missing. No, but I mean, with the Chinese, they're bobbleheads, so if they bobble it and they fall on it, that's different than a quarterback just collapsing, right? You can kind of tell the difference. If they do the John Paxton flop, it's not going to count, right? And if you don't know who that is, shame on all of you. Okay. Yep. (8U's Mighty Mite, what the old Mighty Mite. So 8U is, for 8U and 9U, you use that one that has 12 plays as starts that line. So it's the line right above where it says like team name. The very top line is only for, we used to say only for your competitive teams, but that doesn't really work anymore. So the very top line is your 10U and above. So the smallest number of plays 8 or 9U could get would be 8. They have to at least get 12. Most 8 and 9U games are going to have 12 plays. Very few teams have enough to go and get those smaller ones, the smaller numbers. Any other questions? If you're really a little nervous, I would maybe suggest, you can go to just like, if you have someone at your association who's done this, a few times. You may want to just go and shadow them. Please, however, do not feel like you have to in any way, shape, or form take any kind of guff from coaches. Just don't even entertain. When I train the staff for regionals, I tell them, don't even engage. If they really start kind of barking at you, just either ask someone to go get a site supervisor from that location and kind of walk away, or you can even ask the sideline judge if they can, radio. Sometimes they have radios and they have eyes on somebody they know is a board member or a league member. Like I said, we, both at the regional and the league level, try to get out to as many games as we can throughout the season. We may not be at your site all day, every game, but we try to get out there and have a presence so that if anything comes up, we can help, smooth any of those bumps. Unless there's more online questions. You can always email any of us. We all are listed on the Mid-America staff page. And under, if you look at About Us is the menu option. If you put your mouse on that, I think even if you just hover, it'll drop down and it'll say Our Staff. When you click on that and go to our page, there's a hyperlink under it with our name. If you click on that, it'll pull up our email address, so you can email us questions at any time. If you have problems, let us know. We'll make sure it gets back down to the appropriate person in that league or association, whatever's appropriate, because we do know that it's a lot to ask of volunteers to come out and do this, and it can be a tough gig, for sure.
Yeah, we should like repeat.
Dude, I always get a raise every year. They added an extra 0. So I make a lot of zeros now. They're all zeros, but I make a lot of them. All right, thank you. Good night.